Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news. The coronavirus pandemic now moving so fast, things are changing by the hour. And several provincial public health officers have new advice for Canadians. Alberta, BC and Quebec are asking that all public events involving more than 250 people be cancelled. People in BC and Alberta are being advised to avoid all non-essential travel outside the country. That includes to the United States. Quebec, Alberta and BC are asking anyone coming back into Canada, including from the United States, to voluntarily self-isolate for 14 days.
We've been watching very carefully, particularly for us here in British Columbia. We've been watching what's happening in Washington State, and we've been in contact with our colleagues in Washington State. What became apparent to me over the last 24 hours is the extent of the community spread in many, many, many different communities in the U.S. And I think it's only become apparent to our colleagues in the U.S. as well, that this is something that has gone beyond what they actually thought they were dealing with. And it is very challenging with the system they have in the U.S. for them to catch up.
The health minister added this advice for those planning to travel for spring break.
Now is the perfect time to consider a staycation and stay in Canada. There are lots and lots of places in our country that many people have never been to, and this would be a great time to stay home.
In Canada, confirmed cases of COVID-19 are going up all the time. There are now more than 140 in 7 provinces after Manitoba and Saskatchewan reported their first cases. President Trump's decision to close the border to most Europeans came as a massive shock. It sent the markets and the airlines into a tailspin. There's been a cascade of cancellations, including the lights going out on Broadway in New York City, Disney closing in California, a ban on gatherings in New York of more than 500 people. There is lots to get to. We begin in Ottawa with David Akin and the pressure to slow the spread of this pandemic in Canada. David.
Well, lots of pressure on governments everywhere, Donna, but here in Ottawa, this really was a day without precedent. The first time a sitting prime minister has had to self-isolate for health reasons, forcing a crucial First Minister's meeting to be put off. Given the circumstances, we'll be postponing our meeting, Trudeau said on Twitter. In the meantime, we'll speak on the phone about how we can mitigate the spread and impact of COVID-19 and keep Canadians safe. And that conference call is likely to happen Friday, and it's likely to have just one item on the agenda.
We need to strip away all the non-essential issues right now and focus on, A, the public health crisis, how we coordinate action in that regard, and secondly, we need a clear indication that the federal government will be stepping in with significant support.
And by significant support, Kenny means billions of dollars to offset the economic fallout. And while Trudeau, now in his home office, is under pressure from the premiers, his ministers in the House of Commons are under pressure to do more to get Canadians to avoid large crowds.
What is the government doing to show leadership and encourage social distancing to prevent further community spread?
Answer: rely on the good judgment of Canadians.
The way that we conduct ourselves as Canadians now can significantly decrease the rate of infection in Canadian society, and part of that is making decisions as individuals about where we will go, whether there are large gatherings where we will go.
Now, the federal government is providing what it calls technical assistance to provinces who may wish to restrict gatherings of large crowds, but it will be up to those local authorities to enact such restrictions. And in the meantime, the Prime Minister's unprecedented decision to self-isolate is a case of leading by example and doing exactly what health officials have been saying. If you or a spouse are sick, stay home. Donna?
All right. David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. Here are the numbers across Canada now. BC has 53 cases. At least 3 new ones are at a West Vancouver nursing home. Alberta has 23 confirmed cases. Saskatchewan, Manitoba and New Brunswick now have at least 1 case. Ontario has 59 confirmed cases, and there are 13 in Quebec. And for the first time in Canada, there are confirmed cases in children. In Ontario, a baby boy has COVID-19. In Calgary, a child who attends a daycare has tested positive. It's in a downtown office tower and has since been closed. Staff, children, and their families have been told to self-isolate for over a week. It is important to point out there is no evidence children are more susceptible to the virus than adults, and that severe symptoms in children are uncommon. Any parent knows, though, how effective children are at spreading illness. And today, Ontario announced it is closing schools for 2 weeks after March break. Our Jeff Semple has more on this tonight. Jeff, what's the rationale for doing this?
Well, Donna, this decision affects more than 2 million students at publicly funded high school and elementary schools across this province. Tonight, their parents scrambling to make alternate arrangements after learning late today that their March break will now be extended into April. In announcing the decision, the Ontario government cited advice from the province's chief medical officer of health, who was concerned about the growing number of cases in the United States and about the prospect of many families from Ontario traveling abroad during the break. So what this decision does is effectively turn a 1-week break into 3 weeks. Students now scheduled to return to school on April 6th, though the province says that could be extended. Now, this news appears to have taken many school boards in Ontario by surprise, including here in Toronto. No word yet on any services or support that might be offered to parents, including, of course, childcare. Ontario, Donna, the first province to take this step, but there's a growing expectation now it won't be the last.
Okay. Jeff Semple in Toronto, thank you. And Jeff, we'll be back a little later with some answers to specific questions from you, our viewers, that you sent us about the pandemic. Europe is reeling after President Trump abruptly announced unprecedented travel restrictions. The European stocks index ended the day with its biggest loss ever. Investors are worried about the widespread impact on a ban of flights from 26 countries. There is an exception for citizens from the UK. As Crystal Goomansingh reports, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is calling the pandemic the worst public health crisis for a generation.
The European exodus started early to try and beat the travel ban announced by American President Donald Trump. Miguel Paracuelos feared the restrictions would keep him from getting to Miami for work. He says it's a measure that Trump has taken because he is inept and has not been able to take any action there, so he is somehow blaming the external enemy, in this case Europe. Reaction from the European Commission, a little more diplomatic.
The U.S. decision to impose a travel ban was taken unilaterally and without consultation. The European Union is taking strong action to limit the spread of the virus.
New measures aimed at slowing the spread of the virus are being introduced daily. For example, Scotland is banning large gatherings. Finland's national airline canceling flights to the United States until mid-April. Schools and universities are being closed in Ireland, France, and the Czech Republic. Catholic churches in Rome have been ordered to close. COVID-19 has killed a medical professional in northern Italy, Roberto Stella. The UK shifted to the delay phase in its COVID-19 battle plan, saying the region is just a few weeks behind Italy and is on the same trajectory.
I must level with you, level with the British public. More families, many more families, are going to lose loved ones before their time.
To protect the vulnerable, everyone in the UK, even if they haven't been tested for COVID-19, is being instructed to self-isolate for 7 days if they have a new continuous cough or a fever. Donna?
All right, Crystal Goomansingh in London, thank you. Here's what's happening in Europe in terms of numbers. Italy still has the biggest outbreak. More than 1,000 people there have died. There are confirmed cases in every European country now, and in the UK as well. As of tonight, there are more than 22,000 cases across Europe. In the U.S., there are more than 1,300 confirmed cases and almost 40 deaths. Those numbers, though, are going up almost by the minute. The pandemic sent markets into a sharp sell-off again today. The TSX plunged more than 12%, the biggest one-day drop in history. And late today, Canada's finance minister spoke, trying to reassure investors.
We have a very, very strong fiscal position in Canada, the best among G7 countries. So that's going to allow us to continue to invest to make sure that our economy stays strong.
Investors and travelers are shocked by President Trump's abrupt decision to shut America's borders to Europeans. Abigail Bimman explains what it means, plus some of the places and events in the U.S. that are shutting down.
I will always put the well-being of America first.
In his Oval Office address, President Donald Trump blamed Europe as he slapped a travel ban on the continent.
A large number of new clusters in the United States were seeded by travelers from Europe.
During the address, Trump said borders would be closed to trade, too.
These prohibitions will not only apply to the tremendous amount of trade and cargo, but various other things as we get approval.
An hour later, he reversed that, tweeting, "Trade will in no way be affected." Few details and contradictory information caused anxiety and panic, both for Americans who didn't understand how they'd be impacted.
The airline had no idea what to do, what to say. They didn't even know to tell us to get on the plane, not get on the plane. So most of us made the decision to stay back.
And for global markets. But Trump didn't offer new details or effective reassurance Thursday.
You can just get in the tunnel and you'll be in the UK. So again, it's a decision they made. It has its ramifications. We'll see whether it's worth the trouble.
As New York State took yet another big step in containment efforts, banning gatherings of more than 500 people, including Broadway shows. While on Capitol Hill, medical experts answered questions once again.
It is a failing. I mean, let's admit it.
Dr. Anthony Fauci addressed what Trump did not, the shortage of available tests.
The idea of anybody getting it easily, the way people in other countries are doing it, we're not set up for that. Do I think we should be? Yes, but we're not.
Lawmakers are now debating economic relief measures. Trump is calling for tens of billions of dollars in aid for things like low-interest loans, a payroll tax cut, and financial relief for those in quarantine and their caregivers. And as they debate on Capitol Hill, officials have closed the complex to the public a day after a Washington State Senate staffer tested positive for the new coronavirus. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Washington.
We know you have lots of questions about this virus. Jeff will continue to consult with experts and try to answer them. Email us at yourquestions@globalnews.ca. Our website has a special page dedicated entirely to the new coronavirus. That's at globalnews.ca/coronavirus.